So I guess the question for tonight is, when you experience something that is difficult in your body or mind, what do you do? What do you do? What is the approach to deal with difficulties? What do we do? Keep silent. That is true. That is definitely the right answer. I know whether you intended it or not, doesn't really matter. You're better than your intentions. That's silence. Now, we had on a retreat, silence was emphasized. Frequently. And largely kept, but with resistance. But if you could then, even with some of your resistance, sort of somehow enter and, I won't say embrace, but adjust, make a little shift in what? In expectations, basically, in expectations, in silence. When we're around other people, we suddenly can enter a room without the expectation from others that we're going to receive some comment, or from ourselves that we have to give a comment. Right? So it's like a two-direction expectation. I don't expect from myself that I need to say anything, and I don't expect from them that they need to say anything. And then all of a sudden, your expectations hopefully are fulfilled. You know? Meaning that doesn't happen. So it's kind of a relief, in a sense, because the whole need to assert and prove oneself based on that two-direction expectation suddenly is not relevant. And then you notice something else. Okay? Now I'm relating that to our daily meditation, where I said, look, what do you do with difficulties? And in a retreat environment, or let's say non-retreat, where you're keeping silence, look, other people are a big source of difficulties. So when you keep silent, all of a sudden, there's a different approach to dealing with difficulties. I'm simply not going to open that up. You know? I'm not going to tempt fate, we say. Like, I'm not going to, create any possibilities for, negative experience. And there's a relief there, because, okay, it's okay. And then you see something else. You get to know people in a different way, right? And you know how they are in terms of how they practice, and not how they talk about their practice. How interesting, isn't it? You can give me all sorts of ideas, and we create summaries of other people. But before you know all those ideas, and you get a sense of the person in terms of their presence and their practice of presence. Interesting, isn't it? Especially if you didn't know anything about them beforehand. If you already knew something, then you're kind of reading things into that. Yeah, I remember I once read about Leonard Cohen being in that monastery, Mount Baldy, which was in Northern California. And it was a very strict monastery, and they had a very hard schedule. And they interviewed one of the monks there about him. It was pretty exciting to be in a monastery with Leonard Cohen, world-renowned celebrity. And he just said, well, he was was really serious about his practice. That was like the comment. You know, he was serious about his practice. I mean, that's how he knew him. He knew him about, like, he came to, you know, the morning meditation on time. He, you know, did the work without any complaints. He, you know, did what he needed to do. He was serious about being here. And that's what mattered. You know, that's how they knew each other. And if you were to say, well, wait a second, did you talk about his music or his performances or anything like that, or what, you know, who Marianne was? I mean, did you talk about this stuff? I was like, he like, I mean, he was a strong sitter. You know, he sat like a mountain. That's what mattered there, okay? And it didn't matter just there, you know, because that impression, let's say then you go and you see someone perform really well, and then, but you really, the way you first knew them, your biggest impression was how they were sitting. What really is, what's deeper there? And so when we are silent with each other, we allow each other to express our depths in a way that when we're trying to show off with our opinions, we miss. All right? And it's not that we're intentionally showing off, it's just what we do all the time. We're trying to assert ourselves. And it's not that we're trying to assert ourselves with other people. I don't need to prove to you who I am. What we're doing over and over again is proving to ourselves who we are. Right? We are compulsively trying to secure our sense of self. And why do we always need to do that? Well, it's basic. Because there is no solid self. And therefore, we're always trying to secure something that doesn't have a core. That is the kind of Buddhist understanding of this addiction to asserting ourselves all the time. We're always trying to, you know, secure something that is not securable. And because we don't plunge into the depths to realize that truth and just give it a break, like, oh, that's why it's not working, right? That's why no matter what I succeed in, whatever I do, I need to make it more secure. That's why I always need to tell other people what I think, right? It's not because I'm insecure. It's because insecurity is the nature of our existence. It's the nature of the self, is that it's insecure. And when I can accept that fact, I no longer waste so much effort and energy trying to secure something that can't be secured. Okay? And that, for a moment, is what silence can give us. It can return some of that energy back to our practice, which we're always wasting on trying to secure ourselves on the outside. I'm not saying we shouldn't speak. I'm saying that we should speak when it's not just about us. What do I mean by that? When it's not about trying to secure our sense of self. And to know where your speech is coming from, that is right speech. If it's for your sake, it's not right speech. So that's what silence can help us come back to. Silence, in essence, is the practice of right speech. So if we're wondering, how do I practice right speech? Oh, yeah, speak truthfully, that's one of the precepts, right? Okay. But even before that, there's noble silence. Noble silence is the background of right speech. And you can be practicing noble silence while you speak, if your speech is not for the sake of establishing a strong sense of self, right? But if it's for the benefit of your and others' practice of, you know, true liberation, then it's right speech, okay? Based on silence. Now, how does that relate to our meditation practice and how we deal with difficulties, which was the question I first asked. Thank you. Topic of tonight is equanimity. One of the 4 Brahma Viharas, one of the traditional Theravada qualities that we want to cultivate in an enlightened practice. it's an end in itself. It's not a path to something else. Equanimity is, is the path. So how do I understand equanimity? There's loving kindness we can understand pretty well. May all beings be happy. There's karuna, compassion, may suffering end. You may not suffer. Sympathetic joy, which is basically saying, good job, I'm happy for you. Okay? I'm really happy for you. I'm happy for your success. Doesn't take anything away from me. In fact, it adds to me, right? Because we're together on this. So if you do well, I do well. We're all doing well. So do well. That's sympathetic joy. Rare, but real. And equanimity. Long word. What is it? Well, it has something to do with equal, right? It has something to do with nimity. What is nimity? Like a state, an action, something, okay? Keeping balanced. What is it though as a practice? How do we maintain a state of mind, equanimous actually? How do I maintain that state of mind, which is what? That's what I'm wondering. How do we understand equanimity? And equanimity is not something you practice when you're feeling okay. Because then what do you have to gain balance from? It's basically when you're off balance. How do we get back into balance? How do we find our center? How do we recenter? And what does that mean to recenter? Okay, it really is coming back to that sense of noble silence. When we feel the need to assert ourselves, okay, meaning we need to speak and, share our opinions because, hey, it's important, Not so much important what I think. It's important that I feel like I'm real. That's what is important, right? So how does noble silence help that? Because I say, well, wait a second, if I really understand the truth of emptiness, like there's no securing the sense of self, and my sense of self then has to be based on something else other than my, thoughts and ideas and ego, then what is this sense of self based on? Well, the teachings point us to the nature of the mind, okay, which has no quality, thought, or, name to it. It's unconditioned. It is pure awareness. And if I can come back to that, and it's not dependent on any other quality. So if that is my, for lack of better terms, my true self, okay, which is a non-self because it doesn't have any, history or quality to it, it just is my aliveness, consciousness, in the big sense, we say big mind. All of these words we use to describe it are basically, inaccurate for a reason. Because they know, like, how do you say the unconditioned or the unnamed or the whatever? You don't. But you have to. Because otherwise we get stuck in self and start thinking, okay, well, yeah, I am, big-minded. What are you talking about? Who's saying that? So, noble silence, by coming back, it gives us the space and the quiet to listen deeply into the nature of our own mind. And first thing that you notice is how noisy it is, right? But you can only notice that. And this is the celebratory part. This is the part that we can, celebrate and take real refuge in and appreciate, just deeply appreciate. That the very fact that you can see how busy your mind is an expression of big mind, is an expression of clear awareness. Otherwise, you'd just be totally in those thoughts. If you can see the busyness, that is wonderful. And that's a place to say, yes, I embrace that. Not the busyness. I embrace the awareness that can see the busyness. I embrace the silence behind the sound. The only reason I can hear sound is because I'm sitting, my mind is immersed in silence. The area we live in, this universe, is completely quiet. Okay? And that is the stage for all sound to appear. Your mind is completely clear. And that is the place where it is busy, and that you can notice the busyness. If you didn't have clarity, you wouldn't be able to notice it. You'd just be busy. Okay? Totally into it. So that can happen a long time. For a long time, we can be really involved in our thoughts until suddenly you wake up from that dream, and that's awakening. Awakening doesn't have to be this big thing that says, bong, Buddha. No. Awakening can just be, what have I been thinking about for the past half hour? Wake up. Yeah. Move on. And I say it in little ways like foot up, foot down, one breath after another. The awakening can happen in one breath. And the dream and ignorance, going back to sleep, can happen in the very next breath. Don't look for a big awakening. Look for all the small awakenings that can happen moment by moment. And just as important, notice all the falling asleep and the returning to habits of the mind, moment by moment, breath by breath, and step by step. Or bite by bite if you're eating food, or drink by drink, or whatever it is, or word by word if you're speaking. And all of a sudden you're in this discussion like, yeah, let me tell you what I think. Like, I just lost the silence. Okay, just lost the silence. I got totally involved. Instead of observing, I'm now, being driven. Instead of driving this vehicle of awareness, I'm now being pushed along, right? So the waves now have swept me along instead of I'm not surfing anymore. I'm like swamped, okay? So can you stay above the waves even when they're really big? Surf it so you know the size of the wave. You know it's big. You actually know it's dangerous. You actually know it's dangerous, okay? You can be completely surrounded by it too, and you can pass through it. You can actually pass through it, right? Watch some surfing videos. They're amazing, okay? A huge wave, and sometimes with these GoPro cameras, like totally inside this tunnel of water. That's your thought that seems so overwhelming. But in the midst of it, you can know exactly where you are and what you're doing, okay? And that is big mind. That no matter how big and surrounded you are by these disturbing thoughts, you can be aware of what you're doing with it, okay, and not swamped and drowned by it, but rather you just ride through it. Again, it's not saying I'm on top of it and I'm out of it. You can be surrounded and totally in it and there's nothing but water you see, but you don't stop moving, okay, and you know what you're doing. You are skilled enough. And surfing takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice, right, like anything, okay, musical instruments, meditation practice, learning a new language, whatever it is, takes repetition, skill, making mistakes, and learning from those mistakes, right? Think of learning a new language. If you made mistakes, but you didn't notice what the mistake was, but you go on to the next thing you do well, but that mistake wasn't fixed. So you have part of your language really good, but part of it you're making the same mistakes. It can happen. I've seen it. But what you got to do is just say, okay, learning this mistake is actually increasing my ability. It's increasing my ability. It's not a failure. There's no failure when you're learning a new skill. And meditation is a skill of enlightened awareness. Okay? It's a skill of taking refuge in the basic nature of our lives, which is not conditioned thought. Why is it not conditioned thought? Because everybody was conditioned differently. And everyone has different, aptitudes, histories, preferences, skills, languages, cultures. So where'd that all come from? So what's more basic than that, than all these differences? What's more basic? There's no answer to that.
I want to ask about the difference between the fifth aggregate, which is also awareness,
yeah,
and this seem to be more
enlightened awareness.
Yeah, but the Buddha invites us to explore the five and to realize for ourselves the five aggregates, and I'm just wondering, inside the meditation, how, what is the difference between the fifth aggregate, which is supposed to be impermanent, like everything, and pure awareness. How like maybe it's not a question for.
No, it is totally a question, and I'll answer it. I mean, so the 5 aggregates are the description of how the self is created, the components, the parts of the self that the Buddha analyzed. That there's form, okay, have a body, and there's perceptions, like we call them feelings, but feeling is hard because there's an emotional tone to it. It's more like, you get sensation, that's what it is. There's form, body, so let's say I got like skin, and then there's sensation, cold, warm, hearing, voice, air conditioner. I hear that, I hear sound, okay, sensations through my senses, and then there's perception, and perception is when I suddenly have an idea about that, right? So let's say not only is it, there's a sound, but, well, even before the sound, there's just a sensation, and then I recognize sound. And I can go another step and say sound of air conditioner, okay? So there's like perception where I'm starting to objectify it, okay? I'm starting to objectify it. I take the raw sensation and I start translating it into thought. But then the 4th level, okay, is the problematic one, where karma is created, because it's related to like and dislike and desire and my emotional reactions to that. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, air conditioner, there's a sound, no, there's a sensation. Recognize sound, air conditioner, and then, oh, I'm so glad, I hope it doesn't go off, or it's freezing in here, or, whatever. You see, we start to get attachment or aversion based on that information. And it has nothing to do with the actual sound itself. It has to do with my own karma that is relating to that sound as good or bad. Okay? And then, that's the 4th level, which has to do with will and like and dislike. Volition is called. And that leads to the 5th one. And again, these are not all like a step ladder, where it goes, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and that's how it goes. Because it's like more of a circle, like going around, and they feed each other. But then from that sense of, like and dislike and concepts and stuff, and then the thoughts that come out of that, the awareness, meaning consciousness, that 5th level, is more that I've linked it all together into a sense of self. That's where it all comes together, right? Into more of a sense of self. And that's why he says, okay, it's impermanent, and that's how the self is made. Because up until this point, we have like these sort of components where I can lead to like and dislike, but I haven't really unified it all. It's more that sense of unifying it, the 5th level, into, me. So like my general consciousness of like mehood, selfhood, right? So when I collect it all that information, I have a body, the body has received feelings, I have certain thoughts about those feelings or concepts about those feelings, sensations then concepts, then likes and dislikes based on those concepts, and then, yeah, that's who I am. Like, that's who I am. And over many years, that sense of self, which is the 5th level, the awareness of me, self-consciousness, it's instead of just saying consciousness, think in terms of self-consciousness. Like, we're very self-conscious people, aren't we? And here the self-consciousness doesn't just mean what do other people think of me. It means I'm aware of having a self. And the self is predicated, meaning based on these other things.
So it's like the quality of the awareness, or the color of the awareness, you can say. It's like colored by the sense of I'm experiencing this and that, or like
Well, like or dislike.
But it can be like tones, like clarity, this clarity, and this, like all this, I don't know, I have clarity, I don't have clarity, or it's my feelings, like this general like color of the experience is like it's what you're talking about?
Yeah, but even more than that is that you walk away from it with a pretty good sense of self. Okay? That your awareness is not just awareness. Now here's like the important point, that relates to what you're originally asking is what the difference between, say, enlightened or big mind and this awareness, the fifth skanda aggregate, which is like, you know, impermanent and just an aspect of self.
Yes.
What's the difference between these two? Well, one has a very definite sense of self, okay, which is based on the information you got beforehand. So there's a cause and effect relationship. It's all linked to those other four, right? Whereas your big mind is not linked to those other four. It's not dependent on those other four, okay? So the five skandhas are really like a unity of how the self is created. All those parts are working together to give you my awareness of me, okay? And with all the tone and texture that happens with that. You know, like me, it can be feelings too with that. Like,
you can say it's like the difference, like you can compare it to the difference between like air and space, maybe. Like air is like maybe the fifth, like the air is, it has something to do with like, I don't know, with the conditions, if it's like clear or it's not clear and this and that, and space is space. It cannot be contemplated. It's space is always clear.
I mean, air is physical matter. You can also look at it in terms of like the sound and silence as well. You know, like we take sound as being like something that is real and fills it, but we only can know the sound because of the silence. So yeah, so that's the, I don't know if that helps you at all, but yeah. So what were we talking about?
How to lose pain.
Yeah, I know.
Equanimity.
Yeah, I know all that.
Surfing.
But
You were in the tube, you know, that you
oh,
were in the middle of the
surfing.
thoughts, yeah.
Okay, surfing.
And you are not on the top of the wave, so you're in the tube.
Yeah, you're not controlling the water. So when we think about being on top of the wave or in control of our situation, that is self-assertion. And, you know, here we're talking about being in the midst of in the eye of the hurricane, but it's quiet there. Like you're in the midst of it, you're in the middle of it, but your awareness allows you not to be swept away, even when you feel completely surrounded by it. You know, what kind of awareness is that, right? This is what I'm trying to get at with the equanimity, is not just saying, oh yeah, like I accept, but what is the nature of that acceptance, okay? What is the nature of it? How is it realized? Because if I just, you know, say accept, it doesn't really express that feeling that you're having when you're in the middle of the wave, surrounded by danger and having to be super aware of everything going on, right? Think of that moment in surfing. Now, it doesn't have to be like a surfing like that. It could just be the real despair you feel or grief when you've lost something, or the frustration when, you know, you're late and, you know, this wave is actually just anger, okay? So what is the wave you're dealing with? And equanimity is about being not on top of the wave, but being in the middle of that wave, but staying dry, okay? How can you surf? You know, you're surrounded by the water, you're surrounded by that experience, and you don't actually see any light outside of it. Like the wave is completely curled over. You're in the tunnel of your afflictive emotion, whatever it is, right, that you tend to feel a lot of. And when I say wave, the problem is you sometimes think it's action. It can actually just be really depressing, you know, and sad and demotivating. But that's your wave. Okay, that is your wave that you have to be in the middle of. Because why do you have to be? Because that's where you are. You know, that's where you are. And the effort we think we need to make to like, let me conquer this, like a mountain I need to climb on top of and get to the top of so I can, you know, say I've done it. Okay, and then go back down. But you did what? Like, what did you do? You know, so here we are really having to pay close attention. And I think surfing is a good metaphor. I haven't used much, but it's a good metaphor because you really do have to be very aware of all the details of this wave. Where it starts, where it stops, how it's changing. And this is also the key that I'm trying to get to. It's all, and this is what our meditation was about. Equanimity is all about paying attention to change. Okay? It's all about paying attention to change. It will be really hard to maintain equanimity, to be equanimous, if what you're looking at looks like it's not changing. Okay? If you're upset, anger, despair, frustration, expectations, even joy, okay? Now why do we have to have equanimity with joy and pleasure and excitement and happiness? Anyone know? It's just the mirror, it's just the inverse of the suffering, right? And again, we're not being told you should not have joy, excitement, rapture, happiness, passion, all these things. It's not, there's no way suggesting that, and that is a misunderstanding of what equanimity means. That's indifference and non-caring, okay? We're breathing in our life and want to live fully, but not more than that. Not more than that. Live fully, but not more. Okay? Now what is the more? The more is attachment. That's the more. So live as fully as you can, but not more. Because that's greedy. And what does greed come from? It comes from self, being afraid that you're not secure enough and you need more. And you need more to secure your sense of self. And it comes back, that problem comes back from not seeing the nature of yourself as really empty and changing. So it's not only looking at the impermanence of your phenomena, but the impermanence of yourself. It all comes back to self. All the problems that we deal with comes back to attachment to objects? No. Attachment to my sense of self, which is basically impossible because there's nothing to get attached to. So I keep trying the wrong thing and I'm insane because I keep trying something that's not working. I do it over and over again because I don't know what else to do until I encounter wisdom teachings that say, give it a break, give it a rest. You've tried this forever and you're still insecure and you're still grasping at stuff that will not give you lasting happiness. When we wish metta for people and for ourselves, we're not wishing happiness like, may you just have a good sleep. We're wishing, which I do wish myself, but we're wishing lasting happiness that is not dependent on changing factors that will necessarily change. But wait a second, everything does change, so then how can I find lasting happiness? That's right, you're not going to find it in this world. You're not. You are not going to find lasting happiness in all the achievements, objects, and activities of this world. You will find temporary happiness, and that is good enough, as long as you know that it's temporary. The problem is we don't. So we keep going for the next thing. The truth and the source of lasting happiness is in that nature of the mind that is not dependent on any changing factor. So our meditation practice is, yes, to realize true and lasting happiness and to be free from suffering. And the suffering is the expectation and the constant, what's that? That wheel that goes around that gerbils use? Okay? That mouse wheel. I forget what it's called. Treadmill? Going round and around. Okay? How do I get off of it? Noble silence. Noble silence. That doesn't mean you're not speaking. Okay? It just means you see your words and the thoughts of yourself for what they are. Okay? A dream that you're dreaming. And dream that dream. Right? But know it's a dream. Right? Know it's an illusion. And then create the best illusion you can. Create the best illusion you can, right? Improve it, you know? Be successful with it. Be beautiful with it. But know under all of it, it's a dream that will change. Right? And then, yeah, go ahead. Live. But live with wisdom, not with ignorance. Ignorance is believing that the dream, it can be secured and won't change, and is actually a true reflection of reality. Wisdom is seeing through that, and still using it, but now much more skillfully. Not based on asserting and securing myself, right, but based on really using it for the best. So, equanimity then is that acceptance, and that true, deep acceptance that all things change. You can't just say, let's develop acceptance. You have to understand impermanence. And from that deep understanding and observing of impermanence in your life, the life around you, all people, all things, all pleasures and all pains. And that's why equanimity has to be applied to the joy as well. Because if we don't understand all states, including all the pleasurable ones, as impermanent, then we will fall back into our old attachments, hoping it'll last, and let me hold on to it, and then when it doesn't, I grasp again. You know, we tend to think, that's why, that impermanence, that equanimity is generally for the hard things. And I want to tell you, the good things are just as hard. Okay? The good things in your life are just as hard. And not because they feel good, but because they don't last. And it's even more painful when something you thought was, so real and such a reflection of me passes. It's okay, I can accept that the pain passes. It's a lot more hard to accept that the pleasure passes. And that's why equanimity, we have to practice just as, diligently with pleasurable experiences as with painful ones. And when I say practice equanimity, I'm not saying, let me just have balanced mind. No, it's not like that. Let me see the truth of the nature here. What is the truth of the nature? May I awaken and deeply understand the impermanence of all things, and how this experience is an expression of it right now. Let me look at that closely. And that's why I say, if you don't notice the change, you're not looking close enough. Notice the change deeply. And that naturally leads to release. Release of your grasp or release of your aversion. Because if it's really difficult and you see the nature of change in it, right, there's less fear there because, hey, it's going to pass. And if it's really lovely and you see its nature of impermanence, that leads to two things. Makes you appreciate it more. And it helps you let go. So both ways, it's a win-win situation. You want to live fully, practice equanimity. You want to practice equanimity, observe impermanence. You want to observe impermanence, quiet your mind. And that's what meditation really is about. Use one thing from here that happens every week. So we're going to finish. Does anyone have a question or comment before we have one last short couple minutes?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I have two questions. I'll just ask one. It's like
You can ask two, but I don't have to answer them.
Okay. So I'll continue the question that was raised earlier about awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if the awareness of the five aggregates that creates self is that an awareness that exists in small mind and it's a different level of awareness than big mind awareness? Or is it that same awareness that just has a different intention behind it?
Well, okay. So when we're noticing, when you're just like noticing phenomena that's happening, that's just your basic awareness. When you start to think about it, that starts to become like the thinking mind. Now there's nothing wrong, again, I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with thinking mind. Just like there's nothing wrong with, we don't want to create any judgments to body, sensation, perception, and, you know, desires. Like, they aren't the problem, okay? But it's the really, really definite sense of self that I, you know, produce out of those. If I can, and that's why the fifth one is really problematic, and that basically, even more, that bridge between the fourth and the fifth, from will, desires, to sense of self. I'm the type of person who likes this and doesn't like that. Why can't I just like it and not like it without being the type of person who likes it and doesn't like it? You see? They're making, like, of my whole, defining my consciousness by these experiences is a bad habit. Okay? It limits us, because all of a sudden we have a sense of character. Right? And then you have, like, that's who I am. That's who I am. Okay? And the more you reinforce that, the harder it is to open to the fact that you can change. So, to the question, the just observing is awareness. Noticing, breaking it down into like, oh, there's a sensation happening right now, or, you know, well, I have a strong dislike of this. The labeling, okay, is thinking mind. That's why in meditation I'm always careful when I talk about labeling, because it can very easily just be like I'm not so much observing, now I'm thinking about it, right? In fact, it's kind of hard to give a label without it going into thinking mind. So I don't use labeling so much. So I try to just maintain that quiet, observing mind, which is a reflection, which is an expression of the awareness. Thinking can lead to that more in the sense that when you study, you know, you had to study even just about the skandhas, right? And then if you read things about, you know, the Dharma and whatever wisdom teachings you use. So it's kind of purifying some thoughts so that it will make your practice more likely. Because when you learn wisdom stuff, it will encourage you to sit and observe. If you have no idea what it's about, then what's your reason for sitting and observing? So use the thinking mind, and then when you sit, you don't.
So it's somehow, in the skandhas, it's somehow awareness plus thinking mind. It's like taking awareness a step further. Like you're aware.
What, the fifth skandha?
I like this, I don't like this, and then you take it a step, take it a step further with kind of thinking mind, and that's the step that creates, actually.
Well, it's not even, I mean, the like and dislike, the fourth skandha, volition, is not even really thinking, I like this or I don't like this, because that's already presumes that you're looking at it. It just, you know, you have this reaction. You have a reaction. And then you have a sense of self out of that reaction. You know, me, it's not just liking and disliking, it's I like and I dislike. When you can just keep it to there's strong like, there's strong dislike, that's observing it without identifying with it. So this is what the fifth skandha is about, identifying with your experience as an aspect of me. So it's that identification, which we always are slipping into with language. And this is why silence needs to be a part of our practice, because we always predicate our experience with like, I like coffee more than tea. I like, you know, this room better than that room. It's all about I, you know, or me. I mean, we don't just have this reaction, we identify with it. So the identification with our experience as an aspect of me is the fifth thing. Maybe that can make it a little more, you're not just seeing it, you're identifying with it. Right? And then it's like this consciousness of me. That's who I am. Okay? So sometimes we can shift our language so that instead of, like, I am really impatient right now, there can be thoughts of impatience, or I am bored, there's boredom. And it's not about me. Okay? So we can use language to travel backwards through the process a little bit, and that sometimes is helpful, where you can deconstruct what we've been constructing. So you can de-identify with the experience by simply using, you could say, self-neutral language. Like there's gender-neutral language, so we can use self-neutral language. So instead of, my legs are hurting, there's pain in the legs. Talk about it in the third, not the third person, the third experience. I don't know, but self-neutral language. Try that.
Thanks.
Time for half a question? No. You had half a second to decide. I'll stay a couple minutes if someone wants to say something. So here's the type of equanimity, the story of Ryokan, and I want to finish with this. Ryokan and the moon, the famous story, it's a real story of the monk Ryokan in the 18th century. And he was in Japan, and he was living in his little hut, and he was a poet, monk, totally impoverished. He had just his robe, and that was it. That's all he owned. So he lived in this little hut with just, a straw bed. And he's lying there, but of course a thief came at night and saw the hut and went into the hut and was looking around, and Ryokan woke up and he saw this thief looking around in the dead of night, didn't find anything. And as soon as the thief saw Ryokan getting up, most thieves are like this, they're not violent, they're just chickens. So he ran out, he jumped out the window, and Ryokan grabbed him and said, "Stop, stop!" And the thief, of course, was certain that Ryokan was going to haul him to the police or whatever was back there, the samurai. And he said, "No, here, take this." And he took off his robe and gave it to him. He would not leave his guest without a gift. So the thief was so surprised, he was speechless, but still ran away with it, with the robe. And Ryokan, the image of the story is Ryokan looking out the window, the open window, at the thief disappearing into the night, and then he notices the full moon. He looks up and he says with this sadness, "If only I could have given the thief this moon. If only I could have given him the moon. Right? If only he could have shared with him the wisdom that you have everything already. You don't need anything else. And your desires will never satisfy you. And your sense of lack is endless unless you look up and you see the full moon of your enlightened mind. And then you'll always be fulfilled." May we remember the full moon even when we don't see it. May you be well on your journey.